There it is. If you can quickly make that investment in yourself, you will find that AI now becomes far easier to manage, far easier to implement, and far easier to justify because it's going to do so many amazing things for you. But until you get to that point, really none of those benefits are going to come to reality. You must first achieve that kind of inner reality. You must become Steve Rogers as an MSP in order to unleash the benefits and the power of artificial intelligence. AI is not the starting point. It's the reward. It's the reward for a proactive MSP who has already put the time and investment into their own MSP practice, making it proactive. What is the MSP AI paradox? That's the question we are discussing today. It's an important question, and it's one that a lot of MSPs are wrestling with even today. I talk to a lot of MSPs of all maturity levels, all different sizes, and they are each dealing with what I call this paradox between managed services and artificial intelligence in their own unique ways, trying to accomplish a certain set of outcomes, business and technical outcomes. That's the premise of today's topic. Let's dive right in. No doubt, artificial intelligence is rapidly becoming or has already become, I think it's already become a defining force in managed services. You're already seeing vendor tools embedding AI into their technology platforms. Managed services customers are coming to MSPs asking very pointed, very specific questions about which AI tools they should be using and how should they be using these AI tools properly. And naturally, that brings a lot of pressure onto the MSP to be able to not just have technology knowledge to deal with those technology issues, but to have an opinion, to be comfortable enough to share that opinion with a client who comes to you and says, what should I do regarding AI? Guide me, help point me in the right direction. And I think that that's where a lot of MSPs actually struggle because it's not just saying, hey, which is the best server out there? Which is the best laptop? Which is the best firewall? You know, MSPs have a lot of opinions on those technology forward questions. But to the question of how should my law firm use artificial intelligence? How should my dental practice? How should my freight company? How should my pick your business, right? There's so many different industries all over the world asking the same question. How do I use AI? And they're asking that question of the MSP. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the MSP to come up with AI solutions. And that's our reality today. That's what we have to deal with. The response from MSPs, however, is very, very different. And you will see a marked change or difference of the quality of response and the difference of the quality of the solutions offered by the MSP, depending on a few things that we're going to talk about soon. But that brings me to what I'm calling my ninth law of managed services. And this is another reminder. I have to put this all down in my book because they're getting too many just to keep track in my own mind. But I'm calling this one Weaver's ninth law of managed services. And that is this: the more reactive an MSP is, the more difficult it is to incorporate AI into their practice. Or alternatively, the more proactive an MSP is, the easier it becomes to implement AI. That's the paradox. The proactive MSP, the one that arguably needs AI the least, has the easiest time implementing it. And the reactive MSP, the one that needs it arguably the most, is the one that is going to have the most effort required, the more difficult climb in order to unleash the power of AI. That's the paradox. You follow me? We're going to get into details of why this is true and how you can solve that paradox. So why does AI expose the reactive MSP. So at the surface level, the AI tools that are out there are commercially available to everybody, right? So we're not talking about, MSPs, mature MSPs having access to very unique tools that only they have access to. That's not true. They have the same access to tools as any other organization anywhere on the planet. Everyone can buy the same tools. They can enable the same features. They can deploy the same co-pilots, right? All the same. But AI doesn't create value in isolation. It amplifies whatever operational reality already exists within the organization. I like to think of that, and this was the easiest thing that kind of jumped out at me when I was thinking about this. Is I call it the Steve Rogers effect, right? So this is for those of you fans of Marvel comics and like Captain America, right? When Steve Rogers was still a scrawny kid and wasn't very strong, right? Hadn't taken the serum, the Stark serum, or whatever that was. They were looking for candidates to put through this special program and make into a super soldier. And they were looking for someone who had a good core fundamental being. And the same could be true for MSPs that are going to use AI to amplify and automate and scale and do all the things that AI is supposed to do for you as an MSP practice. It has to already exist to some level in your MSP practice, or it's not going to just suddenly materialize. It is not the type of thing that's just going to wave a magic wand and suddenly all this stuff appears. The reactive MSP, right? And I'm not saying that reactive MSPs are evil or bad or anything like that. That's not my point. The Steve Rogers effect is simply saying that if you don't have certain core elements inside your MSP practice, AI is not going to make them happen. You're going to have to do that yourself. And what does that specifically mean for you? The reactive MSP typically is defined by the following characteristics. Inconsistent documentation. It doesn't mean you don't have any documentation, but it means that maybe you have incomplete. You're not fully all the way there in terms of documenting all of your process and procedures and et cetera. It typically means that you have the beginning of process, but maybe you have fragmented procedures. You haven't fully connected all of them together. You have certain elements here and there, but not completely. You may have a very, very chaotic ticket handling process, both internally as well as how your customers interact with you via your tickets. Tribal knowledge. This is a big, big problem within the reactive service provider mentality. And that is typically it's an individual or a very, very small group who lock away and hold on to information and really are just refusing to share it. Again, I'm not going to assign any ill intent to this, but it's just a phenomenon that we all know. I've seen it for so many years. You all know it exists. I know it exists. But the problem is, how do you get that knowledge out of that person or that small group's mind and get it into the larger community so that you can actually scale and grow as an MSP? And then finally, this kind of notion of the reactive MSP being in firefighter mode. You've heard that phrase probably a lot. What that means is, what I think it means, is you actually take pride and joy in being the hero, in going in and putting out that fire. I don't mean this to be inflammatory, no pun intended, but if you're wanting to be the firefighter, then you got to have fire. And if you are an MSP, fire is the last thing you want. You want no fire. You want calm. You want peace. You want tranquility. You want stasis. You want a continuously, smoothly, securely operating system or object or whatever it is that you're being paid to manage. That's the status that you want, not a continual status of things catching fire and getting into the problem to the point where you actually have to rush in and become the firefighter and therefore the hero. Right? Makes sense. In this type of reactive environment, the artificial intelligence really has nothing solid to work with, right? The machine learning models, the RAG models, the automation engines, the generative systems, they depend on structure, they depend on context, and they depend on repeatability, right? Those core inner Steve Rogers, Captain America qualities. When those foundations are absent, when they're missing, AI doesn't reduce the effort. It actually increases, right? Because think about it. AI is not coming in there as a completely autonomous human being, just, jumping in, as a team member saying, "Hey, tell me what to do," or, "I'm going to go and do it voluntarily." They're not. A reactive MSP will quickly, in that scenario of adding AI, they're going to figure out that AI produces somewhat low quality or irrelevant outputs because the data is incomplete, it's outdated, or it's just not configured properly. Automation is not going to typically succeed. It's going to fail more often than it succeeds because the workflows are not standardized. And the AI recommendations are not going to be trusted because the environment or the data underlying it is unstable or it's somehow compromised. You're not going to get the value out of it is the point. And significant human effort is going to be required just to make that AI investment tolerable, dare I say, useful. That is the paradox. That type of reactive IT service provider that I have just described, that is the service provider that needs AI the most. And it's that type of service provider that wants AI to come in and save them. And that's the most difficult scenario to make AI work. That's the paradox. To the opposite side, the proactive MSP, what does that look like? They start off, the proactive MSP, that is, starts off at a very different origination point in their AI journey. I'll just list a couple of the foundational elements, those Steve Roger elements that you will want to see in order to make AI really flourish in that type of environment. They will almost always have standardized technology stacks and configurations, meaning they not only know the vendors that they like to use and the tools that they like to use, but they use them in a somewhat consistent way every single time. They have documented policies, procedures, playbooks, run books, whatever you want to call it. They have a repeatable process and it is written down to the minute detail. Preventative maintenance and monitoring, par for the course. It's just part of what they do. They don't like fires. They don't like being a firefighter. They don't want the fires to even start. They don't want to even get close to a conflagration happening. So they focus a lot on preventative maintenance, preventative monitoring, and that is what they live by. And they encourage customers to adopt that type of philosophy. They have risk management, effective risk management, compliance, controls, all documented, and they have a strategic, technical, and business alignment with their clients' outcomes. In this context, compared to the reactive service provider I talked about before, AI almost becomes an accelerant, right? It's not just going to not be a burden. It's going to be fuel. It's going to be fuel to make that engine of scalability and efficiency operate. The proactive MSP has all the fundamental, foundational, business, technical elements in place, operating already. That's what makes AI able to come in and just turn on. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be effort. I'm not saying that this is an effortless scenario. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, unlike the reactive service provider, the proactive MSP doesn't have to go through and think about, all right, what do I have to scale? They already know what they can scale. Now, AI may come in and give them a whole bunch of new ideas that they never thought were possible. I'm not saying that that won't happen, but they already have a position. They start from a position of existing scalability, efficiency, security, and the AI interaction only makes that stronger, right? It's that Steve Rogers effect. What was already there becomes even more amplified, and you become a Captain America MSP, right? I don't want to get into trouble from Marvel Comics, but you get where I'm coming from. The MSP AI paradox is not really about intelligence, artificial or otherwise. It's about effort. The more reactive the MSP, the more effort is required to clean, normalize, and contextualize the data, right? Especially if you're wanting to run like a type of RAG model. I'm talking about internal use for your MSP practice. The more effort is going to be needed to supervise those AI outputs, right? AI is not the type of thing where you're just going to set it and forget it and never look at it again. AI, as I've said countless times, does require a lot of human oversight, and it always will. And that's why it's such a positive change agent for MSPs, because it's going to do so much for the whole world, but it's going to require an MSP or a human to oversee it and manage it. For the reactive MSP using AI, the more effort is going to be required to fix kind of downstream errors, right? What I'm talking about there is the AI is going to produce a lot of weird outcomes and it's going to chew up time that is very valuable for every MSP out there. And it's going to eventually, or very quickly, I would say, produce less net value than the reactive MSP would have liked. For the proactive MSP, it's going to require less effort to implement that and onboard that AI tool. It is going to increase the speed of achieving a meaningful use case, meaning you're going to see real results faster. You're going to have greater confidence in the output of that AI system that you're using, and the effects and the benefits are going to compound very quickly over time. AI doesn't eliminate effort. It rewards effort that already existed. Make sense? Artificial intelligence is a mirror. It is not a miracle. It is a reflection of what you already have. And if you don't already have automation, process, documentation, repeatability, scalability, it's not going to create it for you. You have to do that yourself. Now, those things that I just mentioned are all achievable, right? I manifestly believe that any reactive IT shop can become proactive very quickly if they make simple, proven changes to their MSP practice. It can happen. And if you make those simple changes, AI can then ignite in a positive way your automation, your scalability, et cetera. That's why I think and I call AI a mirror to who you are as a service provider. It is reflecting either your reactive nature or it is reflecting your proactive nature as a service provider. So what does this mean for you? The real question MSPs should be asking isn't which AI tool should we adopt? Should we go with this platform? Should we go with that platform? And I've heard that a lot from MSPs, even within our own Inspire peer group going back years. I remember they were having this conversation of, does this platform work best or does this platform over here work better? Almost all of them tried different platforms and they almost all came back to the same answer, which is it didn't do what they said it was going to do. What they all realized was they had to first look inward at their own unique MSP practice. And then and only then were they able to say, I'm going to go out and get the tool, the AI tool that is going to help me accomplish this business or technical objective. That is a far better question that you should be asking yourself. AI readiness has far less to do with the AI models and the licenses of the vendors and the vendor tools, and far more to do with your process maturity, your service standardization, the quality of the data that you currently sit on, your existing risk management practices, and the cultural alignment that hopefully exists in your MSP practice around prevention versus reaction. And the MSPs that address kind of these fundamentals will find that adopting AI feels a lot more natural. It's just going to feel right. You're not going to be fighting against this thing. And that's what I would hope for all MSPs. I don't want AI to be this thing that is just a constant, metal on metal grading and it's in constant conflict. That's not what AI should be. So how do you resolve the paradox? You resolve the MSP AI paradox, or rather, the paradox resolves itself the moment the MSP shifts from reactive to proactive. There it is. If you can quickly make that investment in yourself, you will find that AI now becomes far easier to manage, far easier to implement, and far easier to justify because it's going to do so many amazing things for you. But until you get to that point, really none of those benefits are going to come to reality. You must first achieve that kind of inner reality. You must become Steve Rogers as an MSP in order to unleash the benefits and the power of artificial intelligence. AI is not the starting point. It's the reward. It's the reward for a proactive MSP who has already put the time and investment into their own MSP practice, making it proactive. AI then becomes the reward. For managed service providers, the path to successful AI adoption doesn't begin with technology. It begins with discipline. That is the resolution to the MSP AI paradox. If you have questions about that, if you need help along the way, MSP Alliance can help. That's what we do. It's what we've been doing for 26 years. But I hope that this was helpful to you and it starts to make some measurable sense of what you should be doing with artificial intelligence in 2026 and moving forward. Until next time, stay safe.